Hey, so I heard this gentleman, this labor leader, I believe, talking about Amazon and complaining that Amazon was apparently paying $20 an hour and that is not a living wage in most places in the country. And when I heard that, my reaction was, well, yeah, no shit. That is not designed to pay a living wage. Any job that's no experience necessary, entry level job, it doesn't pay a living wage. It never has, at least not in my lifetime. Now, maybe in my grandparents' lifetime, when World War II had destroyed every country in the world and America was the only functioning economy, I suppose you could probably, graduate high school, walk down the street, get a job at the local factory, and buy a house. But that has not been true since at least the 60s. I didn't buy my first house till I was 35. I have four brothers, and none of them bought a home until they were well into their 30s. That's just kind of how it worked. Now, my first job, I left home when I was 18, and my first job was a dishwasher at Jameson's Irish Coffee House, and I was making like 285, 290 an hour, and that was about $400 a month. And $400 a month in 1976 was not a living wage, and I didn't expect it to be a living wage. So what did I do? Well, I got roommates, like everybody else does, and I paid $170 for a room. And no, I didn't have my own house and a garden and a swimming pool, but I had a place to live. Eventually, I became a cook there, made a little bit more money, then I quit, and my friend got me a job in construction, and I worked there for a few years and made a little bit more money. But that's kind of how it worked. You got some experience, and then you went on and got a better job and a better job. Now, when I was in my late 20s, I went into the car business. I started selling cars, but I was a good salesman, and I was making, $40,000, $50,000 a year in my late 20s. And again, that wasn't enough to buy a house, and I still had to have roommates. But eventually, found a guy who actually had a decent job like I did, and we split a house. It was $2,200 a month, really nice house. He got the master bedroom, so he paid $1,200 a month, and I paid $1,000. Because even at 40 or 50,000, I couldn't afford to buy a house in Southern California at that time. And now, as I stayed in that business, I eventually became a manager, then a general sales manager. And yeah, I bought a house, bought a lot of houses, but that took a long time working in that business. And then when I was in my late 40s, I decided I had enough working in the car business, and I went to work selling home improvement. And that job was actually a little bit of a pay cut from the car business, but much better hours. But I was able to walk into a $150,000 a year job plus company car because I had 20 years of sales experience. And that's kind of how you do it. Whatever your chosen career ends up being, the more experience you get, the more time you're working, the better your job pays. And that's kind of how it works. I had a lot of friends that went into construction. And when they started, they're making $2, $3 an hour, hauling wheelbarrows and just being basically laborers. And after 6 months or a year, usually, one of the crews will say that you're a hardworking guy, either a framing crew or a masonry crew or the roofing crew, electrical, plumbing, whatever it may be, and they hire you as a helper. And then, you work for 2 or 3 years as a helper, and eventually you get to be journeyman. And the journeyman guys can start making some serious money. Then maybe you take over your own crew, or you become a general contractor. I have a lot of friends that became general contractors, but it took time, and you work your way up. And every time these entry level, no experience jobs, they didn't pay a minimum wage in my day, and they're not paying a minimum wage in your day. That's just the way the world works. Now, I bought my first home when I was 35. And up until the time I got married, I had roommates. When my future wife at that time, my first wife, got pregnant, then at that point I thought, well, it's probably a good idea to get married. And then we moved into a rental house. And about a year or two later, I was able to actually buy our first small house. And as I worked up in the business and became a general sales manager, we were able to sell that house and get a nicer house. I was lucky I didn't have my first child till I was 35. Now, my older brother, the idiot, he had his first son when he was 22. And he had a much rougher time of it. I remember him struggling, and he was working 2 jobs. His wife had a part-time job, and he didn't buy his first house till he was just under 40. I believe it was 1 or 2 weeks before his 40th birthday when he finally bought his first house. And he ended up, man, he failed so many times I can't tell you, but he ended up finally starting a company and became successful. And he was able to, to finally buy a house when his first son was starting college. But again, that's just the way the world works. I know you look at baby boomers and think we were able to just, basically go down to the local store, get a job, selling hammers at the hardware store and buy a house. Didn't work that way. There were other routes. I don't want to drone on here, but can't help myself. I had a friend that did go to college. I'm a college dropout, but as all of my brothers are. But this particular friend really was a good friend of mine, and he went to college and got a job. I got a degree in marketing, I believe, and he got a job at Otis Elevator. And it was so cute, it was a little entry-level job at Otis Elevator, and he had his little tie on every morning, and he was one of my roommates. And we were all teasing him, about going to, hey, say hi to Mr. Otis for us, because he was making less money than we were in construction working there. But now I just talked to him, I think the last time was about 5 years ago, and he's still at Otis Elevator. And now he's like a senior VP of something, he was on vacation and obviously owns a home, but he basically started in the company and stuck with it and worked his way up in the company. And that's another way to do it. But guys, if you really are under the impression that you're no entry or you're no qualifications, no experience necessary, entry-level job is going to pay you a living wage, it's not. Please remember, the job you get at 19 is not supposed to be the same job you get at 29 or 39. That's not the way the world works, at least not in my lifetime. So when you hear somebody talking about, minimum wage does not pay a living wage, you can't buy a home on minimum wage, well, they're right, you can't. But again, it's not designed to pay a living wage. It's your entry-level job. It's your beginning. And then when you finally, work your way up or you get more experience, you go into a different field, eventually you get a better and better job, and hopefully you'll be able to buy, a house. But don't expect it from an entry-level job, because it's not that way, never has been in my lifetime, probably never will. All right, that's all I got. Bye.